Thanks for everyone for joining this session. I think good morning, good afternoon, and good evening or night to the people who are joining us today. I can see people from different regions and countries. My name is Jose Diaz. I'm the forestry officer from the FAO Forestry Division, and I warmly welcome to all of you to this breakout session on enhancing technical and vocational education and training and farmer field schools, which is organized as part of the International Conference on Forest Education. Briefly, the Conference on Forest Education is built on a year-long effort led by the Global Forest Education Project, which is a cooperative effort of 6 members of the Collaborative Partnership on Forest, namely the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the International Tropical Timber Organization, the International Union of Forest Research Organizations, the Center for International Forest Research or Agroforestry, the Secretariat of the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, and the Secretariat of the United
starting in 2 seconds. What?
For forests.
That's here.
And this is conference is supported by the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture of the German government. Forest education is the primary means to build the knowledge, skills, share values that underpin sustainable forest management and contributes in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and other forest-related goals such as reducing deforestation, forest degradation, protecting and restoring the ecosystem, enhancing livelihoods, and conserving biodiversity and mitigation to climate change. This breakout session, kindly organized and facilitated by the Farmer Field Schools team from the FAO Plant Production and Protection Division, is focused on how to strengthen forest education through a technical and vocational education and training and farmer field schools approaches, and therefore together contribute to enable family farmers in advancing knowledge, skills, and social organization needed for more regenerative natural resource management and forestry, and make forestry more attractive to young people by improving entrepreneurial skills and creating green jobs, while also strengthening innovation capacity and forestry agroforestry jobs. We expect that from this session we can contribute in brainstorming recommendations and ideas how we can strengthen forest education towards these interesting approaches. To facilitate this session, I'm giving the floor to my colleague Susan Phillips. Susan works in the Farmer Field Schools team at the FAO since 2013. Before working at the FAO, she worked at the European Commission, the Center for Technical Agriculture, and as a freelance consultant evaluating community-led forestry programs. Through her work path, she has moved at the intersection of agriculture and forestry, striving to build bridges for more sustainable use of natural resources and better livelihoods. She holds a Bachelor in Biological Science from Oxford University and a Master's in Environment and Development from the London School of Economics and Political Science. Susan, the floor is entirely yours.
Thank you very much, Jose, and welcome everyone. I'm glad to see that the technical problems seem to have been solved, and looking forward to spend a bit of time together in the next minutes. So the first thing I'd like to do is to share a bit how we decided to organize this session. So there it is. So as you can see, I'm now introducing the session and the agenda. And next, what we'd like to do is to take a little bit of time to have a bit of an icebreaker session. So where I will post a link and we'll have a whiteboard and we can, let's say, find a common place where we're coming from in terms of participating to this session. This brainstorming, short brainstorming, will be followed by 2 presentations, one focusing on the Farmer Field School approach to informal adult farmer education and forest smallholder education, and then the second presentation on technical and vocational education and training. This will be followed by a short question and answer session on the presentations, and then we'll have more time to discuss a bit around the overarching topic of this session together, after which we will close. And I hope we'll have time to share ideas and to learn from each other. So as for the icebreaker, we will use a platform that is called Klaxoon, and I will show you how to use it as a demo. So before I post the link, I will be posting a link. Actually, my colleague Zoe Dispretz, who is helping me facilitate the session and is in the Farmer Field School team with me, will post a link on the Zoom chat so that you can join the Klaxoon whiteboard and then share your ideas around a question. So I will show you exactly how that works. It's quite simple, and I think all of you can access it. So now I stop sharing and I share again a different page. That should be this one. There. Okay. So when you click on the link that I will post, you will be able to see 3 boxes. Each box is for a different brainstorming session, and you can zoom in and out using your mouse. And the first one is called Icebreaker. And we would like to discuss together why each of you take a moment to discuss why it is important to strengthen the knowledge and skills of forest users, forest dwellers, and communities in terms of ecological literacy, but also sustainable management of forest. So to do so, there is a plus button at the end, at the bottom of the page, and you can write whatever comes to mind in terms of why do you think it is important to strengthen the knowledge and skills of forest users. I would say because of the urgency, for instance, of containing forest degradation. That could be an example. And you can change the color of your post-it, clicking on here, and then you send it clicking on the green arrow, and it will place it somewhere, somewhere on this. So now I think my colleague Zoe is going to post the link. She just did. So why don't we take about 5 minutes for each of us to click on the link. You will be asked to add an email address. Please do. And then access this board that I'm seeing, that I'm showing on the screen, and add whatever it is that you think is important about reinforcing the knowledge, skills of forest users so that we can achieve a better ecological literacy and sustainable management of forest. If you have any question on how this works, please feel free to open the mic and ask the question or write it on the chat. And yeah, I'll just give you about 5 minutes for each of us to access the link and contribute, and then take a bit of time to read each other's answers. Yes, and please just focus on the first one, the one that says icebreaker for now, and do not even look at the next questions. They're a surprise for after the presentations. I invite the facilitator and speakers to also add their own post-its, and everyone in the room to access it and just write a thought, an idea of why basically you are in this session. I will. Yes, so I see a question on the acronyms, very rightly so. You should, if you don't see the question, scroll left because it is there. As you can see, there's 3 different ones, and we are focusing on the light blue box, not on the other ones. So you're right, Lilia, they are acronyms, and these acronyms will be explained because it's never good practice to put acronyms, but right now on the blue box, there is no acronym. So please focus on that one, and the meaning will be clear. TVET stands for Technical and Vocational Education and Training, and FFS is a participatory education approach that we will present, actually that Stephen Sherwood will present in the first presentation just after this session. You're welcome. Okay, I see some colors and some contributions. Okay, so a lot of interesting ones. Conservation and sustainable use of resources, of course, to enhance knowledge and skills. I see someone added a beautiful picture. Yes, in fact, if you click on the post-it, you can also add a picture if you like to illustrate. So we have the need to transform agriculture from the inside from forests. This is interesting. It's not only for forests themselves, also agriculture. We have the link between forest resources and conservation is also a very important issue that many in the environmental sector struggle with. To build real strategies for forest management, because of course the forest dwellers are one of the most important stakeholder when trying to build such strategies. So it is important, essential to strengthen their knowledge and skills. Then we have all the positive impacts that we hope this would have, improving climate resilience, better sustainable management of forests, sustainable development goals, and many others that I see coming. I'm just going to leave you another minute to maybe add your post-it and read the other ones, so before going to the next session. And we have a beautiful picture of a wetland near forest. I don't know, whoever put the picture maybe can explain what it is, but it's beautiful. Exactly. Here we have pointed out again that who does conservation, who has done it for millions of years, has been millennia, not millions of years, are the dwellers, the ones in the forest. So we should really be working with them and involving them when wanting to work on sustainable management. I see a lot of very nice contributions there. These smallholders the dwellers may hold a deeper understanding of the forest ecosystem, and we may be the one learning something from them. Of course, we have a lot. So we can see cultural value as well. And therefore, not only strengthening their knowledge, but also our knowledge and building better strategies. Okay, I think this was a nice introduction. I don't know if anyone wants to make any contribution by saying something, anything they noticed, anyone who wants to share where the picture come from before we go to the next session. Another picture. Wow. I'll make it bigger. Shows beautiful root systems. nice quote. Right. Okay, so, and then we have a contribution to do better performance in the forest management that I will add on the post-it in case someone couldn't reach the link. Okay, I think we can really tell from these first brainstorming that there are a lot of issues at stake when trying to strengthen the knowledge and skills of forest users. Actually not only strengthening theirs, but strengthening the ones of the other stakeholders involved in sustainable forest management, also in agriculture, in conservation. So it is in a way an exchange, a dialogue that we want to set up. And I think now we will go on to showing two cases where such a kind of two models which show how such a knowledge can be increased and also how such a dialogue can be set up. The first case is going to be presented by Steve Sherwood. So I'll stop sharing. By Steve Sherwood on the farmer field schools. So I will first introduce Dr. Stephen Sherwood and then give him the floor for the first presentation, which is about the ecological literacy in agroforestry's experiences of farmer field school, which he will be presenting. So Stephen Sherwood is a researcher and guest lecturer in knowledge, technology and innovation at Wageningen University. His academic training is in adult education, plant pathology, and the sociology of change. Steve has lived and worked in Latin America, so Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador for over 30 years. And he is a co-founder of a number of grassroots development initiatives that support people-centered development, including Ecuador's Fundación Ecorural and Groundswell International. Steve and his wife, Miriam Paredes, own Granja Urcuyahuayco, sorry, Steve, a family-run, consumer-supported organic farm. And in Ecuador, they are active in the Colectivo Agroecologico. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to Stephen to present the first experience that we'd like to share with you. Hi, Steve. I think we can see your screen, but we can't hear you.
The host muted you.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, there we go. Great, thank you, Suzanne. It's a pleasure. So I understand I need to keep it less than 15 minutes, so we'll shoot for that. And if you will, I'll dive right in and please excuse a bit of my agriculture bias, although we really do practice agroforestry here at the farm. And we also do manage several forests in the area with the communities and the comunas that we live with. And I want to talk about enabling endogenous potential. And so I'll focus a lot on the learning aspects of farmer field schools. I'll give a quick introduction of what farmer field schools are. And I'm really focusing on forestry related themes because it's sometimes we focus on trees and then sometimes the integration of trees to farms. And other times we are focusing on, let's say, well, forest, working with community forest and community forest management. So I'll follow the list of, why farmer field schools. If field schools are a solution, then what is the problem? What is a farmer field school, and at least by design, because often practice is very different than design. A few quick forestry experiences with farmer field schools, and then I want to end with some pressing challenges that we're dealing with right now. Okay, now here's a saying some of you might be familiar with. "Kindly let me help you, else you will drown," said the friendly monkey as he picked up the fish and placed her into the tree. Okay, what we find often is, people have we encounter each other, but we have entirely different worldview. And part of what a field school is about is creating a space of encounter. Let's say, for example, between technicians or scientists or public people, forest dwellers, farmers, people in the markets. So it creates a space of encounter, but it tries to respect differences, and it tries to create a space of mediation around usually a common problem. So that's one of the key issues that we look at, because we do find major problems these days with the conflict of worldview. In modern agriculture, industrial forestry, there is this sort of conflict between this techno-centered society and this society that people live in their daily lives, in their families, in their communities, in their environments. And we try to mediate these different worlds. And we particularly try to create a space for what we call people-centered development, a development that's focused and guided by the users, that focuses on endogenous perspective, that looks at time very indiscreetly, that views local people as agents, as active participants, ideally in new change, and that seek common understanding and not just adoption, or not changing people, but creating an opportunity for people to reflect, okay, and sort of manage their own realities, okay. One of the reasons why we're very concerned about supporting farmer field schools as a tool, as a means of promoting people-centered development, are some of the unwanted consequences of modern, particularly expert-led development, and the impacts that can have in terms of paternalism, sort of restricting people's liberty, creating dependence. Okay, when people become extremely reliant on externally based knowledge, on experts, to the point where they lose their ability to think creatively, to be responsible. And ultimately, we've seen in modernization this so-called organized irresponsibility, where the people, such as that pesticide salesman in the photograph, who make decisions, who guide practice, don't necessarily live the consequences of their decisions. For example, if that farmer were to get ill from that product, the person who sells that product will not be held accountable. And that organized irresponsibility is very dangerous, right? Because we sort of lose these feedback loops that help to guide social and environmental development. Okay. Another issue that we're very concerned about is Paulo Freire, who's an educator from Brazil, who was one of the people, at least his work inspired the field school activity, talked about critical awareness and is how to help people escape this learned helplessness. And so in particular, we're concerned about critical awareness, not creating dogmatic farmers, but people who are capable of examining and evaluating sort of cause-effect relationships of a certain situation, people who are empathetic, capable of observing, confident, yet they can also be self-critical. And that's sort of the product that we're trying to create through a farmer field school. So what is a farmer field school? The goal is to create or to help people develop confidence, competence, to become creative, inspired, and also to organize collectively. The means are primarily, from an educational perspective, ecological literacy, this critical awareness that we talked about, and group problem solving. And facilitation, ideally, we found that the best field schools are led by local people, by forest dwellers, for example, in those rare instances that we found, the community-based leaders, farmer leaders, et cetera. The process is about 10 to 25 participants, okay, who come together, who choose a theme and actually determine the curriculum with support often of an extension agent, etc., an outside person, but usually also a local facilitator. The learning is linked to a crop or to an animal. It's season long. Okay, usually it's about 6 months in agriculture, but in forestry, it often extends to about 18 months. There's all these creative means of chronosequencing, where we'll work, for example, with trees in different moments of their life stages, so that we can link learning to the development of a tree, which might happen across 15 or 20 years. The field of the forest is the classroom. The best field schools don't take place indoors. They take place in the field in the context of activity. And it's discovery-based learning, which is continual every session. And usually the sessions are weekly or bi-weekly. And some of the forestry field schools, they're monthly. But you have a continual, some sort of agro-ecosystem or other form of ecosystem analysis, depending on the problem. And you have these special topics, usually one per session, that emerge across across a field school, across the course of a field school, and continual group dynamics and group building activities. And it's usually linked to a participant-led experimentation, which can be strategic for learning, but also open-ended for solving problems. And the principles of discovery-based learning guide the field school process. I'm not going to have much opportunity to go into this right now, but it's really about allowing people to learn on their own at their own rhythm, and their understanding that learning is evolutionary. Okay. Now, there's a key issue about ecological literacy is what farmers don't know cannot help them. And we assume in field schools that farmers do not know everything. And we've done studies in the past, in this case with Jeff Bentley, an anthropologist who's based out of Bolivia, that studies what farmers don't know. We try not to teach everything in the field school, and actually there's spaces where farmers know quite a bit and have very deep knowledge. And in that area, the goal is to learn from farmers. But there's also spaces, for example, where things are difficult to observe, okay, and they're perceived as not important, and where people don't even have a taxonomy. And this is where field schools try to identify these knowledge gaps and facilitate and help people fill those gaps in a very applied way around things like metamorphosis, around disease cycles, issues of like carbon capture in soils, where farmers don't even have a basic knowledge in these areas. And we work with them to fill these gaps. That's the basis of ecological literacy. And the hallmark of a high quality field school is creativity. When I visit a field school, I want to hear and see things I've never heard or seen before. And that shows that these field schools and the groups and the individuals involved are expressing themselves, but also inventing things and stepping out of the boundaries of the accepted practice. Okay, so I'm going to close with a few examples of, we recently did a stock taking in field schools. We've identified about 200 field school graduates across in forestry related areas of about, depending on the data you look at, but we're talking about 13 to maybe 20 million people who have gone through field schools across the course of field schools since 86 to 89 is when field schools became established in Southeast Asia. And as you can see in this chart, they've evolved from rice integrated pest management to include a lot of forestry themes over time. Okay, and what we found is certain countries like in Honduras and India and Indonesia, Kenya, had very advanced programs in forestry related areas. Others were really still focusing on IPM and focusing on agronomics and animals. And the sort of themes that they were working on were fruit trees, plantation management, dryland woodlots, pastoral systems, agroforestry, the incorporation of trees into food production systems, soil conservation, climate change adaptation and mitigation, as well as community forestry management, and particularly in India, for example, in Indonesia, we found some excellent examples of this. The unique challenges when we go from agriculture to forestry is, well, how do we link it to the crop when you have a crop that is a 20-year organism? and that the knowledge gaps are very unique. There's a lot not known in forestry around pests and things like that. So a lot of basic work has to be done. The complexity of forests, the community dynamics are very different, and the spatial dynamics are very different. And sometimes field schools become problematic. The mobility of forest dwellers is also difficult to manage, in different forms of corruption and violence that forest dwellers and community forest people are facing. Okay, so let's finish up in a few minutes. And so I'm just going to show you a few slides of some of the experiences. It's Latin American biased with fruit tree production. Here's a group in the Amazon working with coffee and other crops. We found experiences in field schools working with soil health, isolating white fungi and other organisms in the soil, in the forest, reproducing them through bioreactors, and integrating that sort of forest population into agriculture through no-till, constant cover, kind of applying the principles of the forest to soil. Groups that are working with post-conflict and rural reconstruction, such as this group in the Colombian Amazon. Resettlement in cases of violence. One second. And working with landscape management, people working with these global issues and working across communities, across huge areas, and different creative ways of landscape management. So I want to end just mentioning some of the pressing challenges that we face. I call this, kind of bring it together, as institutionalization. And what we find is there's so many field schools that have been done over the last 35 years, but we still have difficulty kind of consolidating the approach into a, let's say, accepted social norms of practice. And part of that is because of resistance from technical people, from universities, from the development communities. We find issues of quality happening both in adapting and performing field schools in the forestry setting. Scoping, which means sort of diversifying the multiple new themes that can occur in farmer field schools, and scaling, sort of reaching and financing and the organizational support of field schools into forestry settings, for example, here in Ecuador into the Amazon. And outright co-option. There's a lot of technical rendering and translation in both field schools concepts and process, where often field schools in name and practice end up looking a lot like technology transfer. And we see that happening all the time. And one particular area, this first area, is these new themes, in this case, carbon sequestration and climate change mitigation. And how can we utilize the richness of carbon sequestration of forests and get that introduced into the ecosystems of agriculture? And that's one of our big challenges right now. There's new thematic areas that are happening as we try to collapse the dichotomy between forestry and agriculture. And let me end there. I think I've read at 15 minutes. Great.
Thank you so much. You know, you didn't, we started just a couple of minutes late, so it was perfect on time. And despite the fact that we've worked for the past year on the stock taking on FFS and forestry, it's always a pleasure to listen to your presentation. I hope you have all, well, I'm sure you all have some questions and more comments on Steve's presentation. But before we get to the question and answer session, I'd like to introduce the next speaker and give him the floor for presenting. So Per Rudebedge is a capacity development consultant at FAO's Research and Extension Unit, and therefore based in Rome, in Italy, where he supports initiative on agricultural innovation. He holds a master's degree in forestry from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and he has over 30 years of experience in education and capacity development in forestry, agroforestry, and agriculture. At the World Agroforestry Center, he supported 2 regional work networks on agroforestry education in Africa and in Southeast Asia. And then at Bioversity International, he led an initiative on agrobiodiversity curriculum development. Recently, he has been a consultant for the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences in a project on technical and vocational education and training in the forestry sector in Ethiopia. So I now give the floor to you, Per. I think maybe, Steve, you have to stop sharing your screen, if you can, so that we can go to the next presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Susanne, and thanks for the opportunity to speak in this conference. That's a great pleasure for me to be able to do a little bit of work on forestry education, which is one of my passions. And yes, here is the, we minimize this. And first, I would like to recognize two colleagues who have worked with me on this presentation. This is Melese Negash, who is teaching forestry at Wonderganet College of Forestry and Natural Resources in Ethiopia, and Kalle Johansson from SLU in Sweden. And both of them are co-leaders of a project on technical and vocational education and training that is currently going on in Ethiopia, and that I'm using partly as a case study for my presentation. I think we are all aware that forestry is changing quite rapidly. There are old jobs still there. There are many new jobs related to forestry and sectors linked to forestry. We have, of course, a lot of jobs in forest industry. Agroforestry has been around for many years and more formally in education since the 90s. Ecosystem services in many countries, soil and water conservation and biodiversity are very important aspects of what we teach in forestry. Small and medium enterprises are very important. Forestry and agroforestry providing a lot of jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities for young people. And then we have this whole and expanding package on forest restoration, carbon offsets, where huge money are being invested on tree planting and forest management related issues. And at the front line of much of this, we have people who are coming from a background in technical and vocational education and training. So the question, of course, arises: how relevant is this training? What is the quality of the training? And how well do these institutions meet the various challenges in a rapidly changing forest sector? So these are some of the things we will talk about a little bit in this presentation and in this breakout groups. But I start with this. When I looked for information for this presentation, I Googled technical and vocational training and education and forestry. And what happens? A paper from 1920 is the #3 hit on a Google search. This is something from the Oxford Journal of Forestry, where somebody wrote on American vocational forestry education in 1920. So when a 100-year-old paper is showing up prominently in the Google search, it tells you something that not enough has been done on this topic for a while. And therefore, this particular initiative is, of course, very welcome. A little bit on background on forestry education and perhaps particularly this technical education. And much of this is work done by ANAFE around 15 years ago. There is a good report by Professor Temo and co-authors. They found, studying curricula on technical education in Africa, that much of it was tailored to temperate forestry, industrial forestry, and government forestry jobs. But the scope is expanding and it's changing. There is the whole area of local development, participation, social and community forestry, There are many green jobs coming up, especially soil and water conservation, and more recently on climate offset activities. Private sector and entrepreneurship is becoming more important. It's not just government. And in many institutions, there is a shift from forestry to natural resource management education. And we heard that earlier in this conference as well. And in this particular case, they found a declining enrollment in the certificate level forestry education. And we know that the enrollment is dropping generally in many countries in forestry and natural resource management, however, with big regional and country differences. We also need to say a few words on trends in extension and advisory services. And much of this is related to agriculture, which has a much more widespread extension system. So there is generally a shift from technology transfer to dealing more with innovation systems and complex systems. This is emphasizing more the importance of soft skills. And that's part of what we are working on in FAO's Research and Extension Unit, developing capacity on agricultural innovation systems. There is also a more pluralistic extension and advisory service. There are many more actors involved. In addition to government, there are input suppliers, producer organizations, NGOs, projects, etc. Now this raises, of course, the need for a better collaboration and the links between these different advisory services. And it also changes the role of the public advisory service to play a more collaborative and catalytic role in collaboration. Digitalization is, of course, very quickly becoming an important tool in extension. We see more and more of bundled services where, for example, seed supplies and input and advice are coming together. The roles of markets are increasing as well. So that's for a quick background. And now I'm coming to my case studies, which is about training of trainers in forest extension in Ethiopia. And this is linked by a large initiative in Ethiopia on institutional strengthening for catalyzing forest sector development in the country. And this particular sub-project is financed by SIDA through UNDP with a number of partners involved. So this project, it supports Ethiopia's broader ambitions that the forest sector needs an innovative and holistic approach to realize its strategic role in supporting sustainable development of the country. And there are a number of points here that the government has highlighted. That's part of the government's strategy: increasing forest coverage, sustainable supply of wood and forest products, stakeholder engagement in conservation, policy strategies, contribution to youth employment. All of this is coming into play. And the capacity development project itself, it started in 2019 with an extension needs and gap analysis. This was followed by the planning of a training of trainers program, implementation of this training of trainer courses, and then later on there will be a training of extension agents as well. And the main approach here has to be to train staff who are training development agents. So just a very quick snapshot of Ethiopia's extension system. Ethiopia's extension is organized in farmer training centers, and there are several thousand of them. They are organized at the lowest administrative level of Ethiopia. Each of them has 3 development agents dealing with crops, livestock, and natural resources. There is nobody specifically dedicated to forestry. Rather, forestry is handled by the Natural Resource Management Officer. And the forest extension activities is largely linked to soil and water conservation and tree planting. These centers also have high staff turnover. At higher administrative level, there are more technical matter, technical specialist support, such as agroforestry, forest management, nurseries, etc. So this is what needs to be strengthened now through this technical education and training. And such training in Ethiopia is provided by technical and vocational and education training centers. These are colleges focused on agriculture, and they offer a diploma in natural resource management. So this diploma program is what's supplying the development agents to the farmer training centers. In Ethiopia, there is no institution offering a diploma in forestry after 2003. Wondergenet College of Forestry is, however, providing on-demand in-service training on various forestry topics. The forest extension needs and gap analysis came up with a number of findings. There was a poor understanding of forestry extension at regional and zonal level, and poor alignment between the different administrative levels. Often staff assigned to forestry jobs were not foresters, but they had another education such as natural resources. There was a weak link and collaboration between research and extension, which resulted in a limited range of technologies being disseminated in the extension system. And also this saying that forest extension often equals tree planting and management, when many of the other aspects of trees and forests were not included. So they suggested that value addition of forest products and agroforestry products need more emphasis. There was also a poor link between production and market demands. And finally, teachers' competence in those training centers were not up to standards. So based on these results, the project designed curricula for these training of trainers courses. And these were 6 one-week training modules that are listed here. The first one was soft skills in forestry extension, small scale and community plantation forestry, agroforestry, silviculture and management of natural forests, restoration of degraded lands, commercialization of forestry products, and entrepreneurship, and with gender mainstreaming as a cross-cutting topic. And the training program here, which was, of course, implemented during the corona situation, somehow managed to train 28 experts from these vocational and technical training centers, but also from research centers, forestry and agriculture institutions. And the next step now is that these colleges will train about 1,000 development agents in the coming year. Very quickly, in the course evaluation, in this case of module 1 on soft skills, demonstrated that the confidence level of the trainees in teaching others these various topics had increased quite a lot. They were fairly confident or very confident now to bring on these soft skills topic to their students at the next step of the program. So coming now to the conclusions here, relevance and quality of technical and vocational education and training. The knowledge and skills in this case have been upgraded. Students reported a more holistic understanding of land use at the landscape level, and also a better understanding of the role of forestry in the context of ecosystems services. There was, like I said, a strong emphasis on soft skills, which developed a better confidence in working with farmers, and also the gender dimensions were contributing to this. And it's also worth saying something about the teaching methods. In these training courses, we try to, as much as possible, use participants' own experiences as a teaching method. So the sharing of the trainees' knowledge and skills through case studies from the trainees' own home regions were really very highly appreciated as a teaching approach. And the trainees are now highly motivated to teach forest extension. Of course, there are challenges and opportunities as well to continue strengthening Ethiopia's extension training. Making forestry more business-oriented will be still a priority. The perception is still very much a government-led public kind of forestry, but forestry business, small and medium enterprises, and the job opportunities that these activities can bring will be very important. Gender aspects are still overlooked, and this can further be strengthened. There needs to be a better understanding of not just the participation of men and women respectively, but also having a gender transformative approach in education. And generally, there is a need to put more emphasis on forestry in Ethiopia's extension system. Even those development agents that were assigned to natural resources spent much of their time on training on crops and pastoral systems and so on. There is need also in Ethiopia to strengthen the capacity for innovation and strengthening the links between research and development in order to have a broader portfolio of approaches used in extension. And finally, there is a need for continued capacity development of these colleges to sustain the effort and to contribute to robust training, technical and vocational education and training, in order to provide a broad set of competencies that can meet all the needs in a more diversified forestry job market. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Per. Thank you for the very good overview and interesting case study. So maybe I would like to open the floor for any question that the participants would have for either speaker. If you want to learn to know more about any aspect that was presented or want to share a similar experience, both in writing or just open your mic and feel free to speak or raise your hand, however.
Okay, thank you so much. Can I come in first?
Sure.
Yes, I'm Wilson Kasoro, and I want to thank the presenters for the wonderful presentations. But my first observation is to the farmer field schools. That is fantastic. I think it's a very interesting experience. Maybe I'd want to know from the presenter, when it comes to the choice of the themes, because I can see when you have a combination of themes like agroforestry and a few fruit trees and so on, the normal traditional forestry, the hardcore forestry activities like, plantation forestry and probably woodlots tends not to be taken on board because there is a general attraction towards those themes that seem to be a little recent. Now, I'm wondering what the experience is from his program, whether he gets people who say, yes, I want to go and plant a forest without really looking at the other aspects, which seems to be common because we are losing out on what would be called the real traditional hardcore forestry, which it brings on board a number of things. So I think it's very interesting, but I would want to know the experience from that particular project. Now, the other one is to my friend Paul Rudibia. We worked together for quite some time, and that's a very good presentation. And I would want to talk about the element of diminishing practical skills at TVET level. And clearly, when you look at the extension element, these are the people who are supposed to do a lot of the extension work in the field. But then we've got a challenge of diminishing practical skills training. And I do not know how they're handling it, because if the graduates from TVET institutions do not have the practical ability to demonstrate to show farmers, we probably are going to have a big challenge in as far as the forestry extension is concerned. And the other one is about the role of ICT in forestry extension, especially at technical level. I mean, I do know that most institutions, especially at technical level, probably this is not getting on board a lot. But I think we cannot run away from it. We just have to see how to integrate ICT in our training and make sure that the graduates we get out really can go out there in the field and embrace the use of ICT. So I probably would also benefit from my brother Paul Rudibia to see how they are tackling this in the aspect from the perspective of the Ethiopian program, and maybe what we could learn from that. Thank you so much.
Okay, maybe Steve, I see there's another question on to both of you on how do you think we can make forest enterprises attractive, especially to youth, from Jeffrey Wanayama, but that's running over the next session. So we leave that question maybe for the end, so you can start giving your answer, but then we open up to the brainstorming. So maybe if Steve, you want to take the first question and then the next one, and then we go with other questions.
Okay, now there was a lot in there, Wilson, and thank you for the comments. Well, in terms of choosing themes, it's very difficult. Communities often will want one thing, and part of the facilitator's job is to challenge them to think about creatively. You know, maybe they want to think about water, but the bigger need might be watershed management or something like this. But the idea is not to teach everything. In a field school, it's to simplify the world. And you want to choose an experience where you can fill knowledge gaps that will promote self-esteem, creativity, and will get people inspired to tackle more and more difficult problems. So often you find something that's relatively simple, where you can get a quick and recognizable result, and then you can tackle difficult problems. And so often forestry is not the best entry point, at least management of forest, but often maybe agroforestry or trees, like a citrus tree, where through learning about a citrus tree, you can unlock ecosystem knowledge, get people organized and inspired, and work towards the more complicated questions that you point to. I'll stop there and pass it on to Per if he has a comment.
Well, thank you, Wilson, for those questions. I think they were, in a way, common modern questions. But just to start with your second point on the role of ICT and how to integrate ICT in technical and vocational education and training, I think it depends quite a bit on where you are. Different countries are at different stages on digitalization. The rural networks for mobile phones differs a lot between countries like Rwanda and many places in Kenya. Even farmers in very rural areas have good access to internet and smart mobile phones, and more and more digital solutions are coming on board. There are so many entrepreneurs out there trying out different things. In forestry, it's probably a bit less than in agriculture, but of course, opportunities are there, such as providing traceable value chains between producers and consumers, such as having organic production of coffee in agroforestry systems, and how to integrate that in the training programs. I guess that's a challenge that is restricted by resource availability, for example. I think these things were touched upon by this call for action that we heard on in the previous session. Then practical skills training, of course, that's always something that needs continuing attention. We know that in many cultures, the education is something that you look upon as a theoretical activity, and theoretical knowledge is maybe looked upon as a little bit, let's say, more valuable than practical knowledge. So I think it's a continuous, let's say, thing that needs attention to balance practical and theoretical knowledge and the link between them.
Thank you very much. I think there's a couple more questions that I believe are addressed to Steve, but Per, maybe feel free also to contribute. I think one of them is from Alexa Shish. How did you gain the confidence of the people to shift from agriculture to agroforestry, or how did the FFS programs manage to do that? And how did the FFS program locate and recruit students, which is from William Perkis? I believe they are referring to FFS, but if not, please let me know. Steve, go ahead.
Sorry, it broke up briefly, but the first question was how
did you gain the confidence of the people to go from agriculture to agroforestry? I think in some of the field schools. And the second one, how to locate and recruit students or participants, I guess, to these.
Yeah, and as Jose and Suzanne know, there's a crisis, right, in agriculture, a huge global crisis right now, particularly that has to do with carbon and a sort of oxidation of the biosphere because of our bad agriculture and what we've done, particularly to soils, the removal of trees, the removal of natural soil processes and interruption of the carbon cycle has made agriculture, modern agriculture, impossible to continue. And the studies show that we need to correct this in 2 or 3 decades. So somehow we use a lot of creative experiments to help farmers see these sorts of realities. And we introduced those early on during the problem analysis session to help them see what they can't see. Like I remember one we've done here where I live is on water. Farmers were not concerned about water, and we helped them to evaluate water by harvesting the water off of the roofs and measuring it, and realizing that on my 4 by 6 meter roof, okay, I let go of about $100,000 of water per year if I were to bottle it and be able to sell it. And of course, that's not always realistic. But when we measure it and what people pay for water where I live, and so you use something like that, a lively experiment that helps them say, wow, I'm losing $100,000 worth of bottled water off of my roof every year. I need to do something. And so we try to shake them up. And in the forest, we do a lot of work in the beginning of looking at the soil. I'm looking at a farming soil, digging holes and counting the arthropods, for example, and then doing that in the soil and in the forest. And these sort of simple experiments can create a debate and get a group excited about something is wrong with agriculture. How come we don't have so many pests in the forest? How come we don't have to plant a forest? It grows on its own. We start to raise questions. and use these lively experiments in the beginning in the analysis phase, they get people to rethink their questions and to try to choose themes that are more interesting. But I saw that question in the chat about how do we make forestry sexy, relevant, and cool, particularly for youth. And I think that's something we all have to work on because we know it's hugely important from an environmental perspective, a survival perspective. We need to come up with lively learning games that help people discover that for themselves, because telling them is not enough. They have to discover it for themselves.
And I think the second one was on how to recruit students into the field schools, or maybe also into the vocational. So maybe I will ask both of you.
Yeah, I'll say something briefly, but Per might have a better, more insight in it. But we are always creating opportunities for kids to come, for example, to our farm here, to get out, disconnected from the internet in our case, and get them out into the field. And we try to bring in other youth to make it a social event. And to the point that a field school becomes a social event and not just a technical event, we find that people show up and they get excited about it. So you really want to invest in making schools fun, lively. You know, people at schools they should come out with more energy than when they come in and feel every single field school session. And that's the talent of a facilitator. But anyhow, I'll leave it there and see if Per has any comments about how to get students excited about going to the field, as you were talking about during the technical training.
Well, having passionate teachers is one very important thing, of course. Teachers that share their passion with the students. And another dimension is perhaps, and that this is linked to the question on how to, let's say, gain confidence in going from agriculture to agroforestry. This is what the products that are coming out from the system and the potential that you have in those products. But the World Agroforestry Center, for example, when I worked there, the center introduced a program on agroforestry tree products and really emphasizing the value chain and the opportunities for farmers to participating in gainful value chains that are adding value to their crops. In forestry, there is way too much emphasis on the supply of trees, plantation of trees. And I think we see this repeated all over again now in these huge forest restoration activities, bringing those trees into the plot, but not thinking sufficiently about what benefits and what income these trees can generate. For example, building in wood is now becoming a very important aspect in some economies. Is that something that can be brought out in a much wider range? So you combine the climate and carbon sequestration role of timber with a gainful production of trees and forest products in rural areas.
Yeah, great. I think both answers are very interesting and they lead us, I think that's what all of us have an eye of concern for, is this question of youth. And we would like to then now maybe link up to the next, which was to pick your brains a bit, to hear what each of you have to say on how you think that we can make this forestry, sustainable forestry, engage youth in a way that is meaningful for them, and basically make this sector more attractive. So to do that, we had a few ideas already floating around, also in the comments, and I would like you to invite to go back to the klaxoon and link that we used before. If you still have it open, it should still be there, and go to the second box, which then is asking exactly this question, and I will share my screen again. Yes, on how can we better engage youth so that we can reach these objectives of sustainable forestry and all the related objectives that are linked to sustainable forestry, because it has a lot of implications and we know that things are interconnected. So a few of you in the previous section, I noted that they already started answering, which is great. But for the others, it's the same process. Please add 1, 2, as many post-its as you want. We try to have maybe 1 post-it, 1 idea, and share what you think are ideas to make this sector more attractive to you, to engage them, to reach them, to involve them in the sector in a way that is meaningful through training, through practical training, but also in other ways. If you have other ideas, let's share this information amongst ourselves so that it can then, be channeled by our rapporteur, Jose, and then shared back into the bigger sessions. Because I think this is a key question, as we know how important forests are for our entire human ecosystem and non-human one. We have to find ways to involve the next generation. So I'd like to invite you to take about 5 minutes once again to start populating the post-its, and then we can maybe comment and feel free to discuss. So yes, please focus on the green box only for now, if you can, and add your ideas. I will also add mine. And of course, our speakers are invited to add theirs too, so we have a complete picture. So we had some things already written before, which included the digital aspects, which of course are important, and Wilson had mentioned, which is a bit overlooked, but we know that it's a very important aspect also. And I liked what you said about it needs to be in the field, but also, making the best use of these technologies to make youth interested, and to facilitate sustainable management. Trying to organize your responses more or less in clusters. Okay. Great. Give you another couple of minutes. Even more. I see fewer post-its appearing. So I can see a few clusters that are coming out, a lot about field exposure and promoting activities that, are allowing youth to be in the fields, creating opportunities for them to be in the forest, exposing you to important aspects of the forest. And one particular one, which is sharing a spectacular moment in the forest. And it's true. I mean, I read some research also of how important it is if you create kind of affective kind of relationships with each other, or special moments or personal moments while you're in a certain place. Well, you also kind of link to that place emotionally, and then it's this link that you create with the forest that is not necessarily rational, that gives you the strength and the will to then undertake kind of rational or studies or other decisions afterwards. So it's important. And then Steve, you shared about the SERA, Society for Ecological Restoration in Australasia. I wonder if you want to say a bit more about what this program is about? Briefly.
Sure, it's fantastic, actually. I just learned about it, a friend was telling me. But it has to do with getting youth involved with defining their own project, like adopting a creek and cleaning it up and reforesting and educating. And it's government supported and it's fantastic. And you'll see some examples there, and they have guides on how to facilitate and support the youth in these projects. And the kids, yeah, sometimes it's recycling, but often it's about replanting and sort of adopting an area that's theirs. And every grade does this in many, many schools in different parts of Australia and New Zealand. And I think it's fantastic and a good example for us all. Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, and then I see also quite a lot of ideas around how ICTs can be used. One, to get the forest dwellers and youth to join in these kind of conferences or connect them to each other online, but also to maybe show a certain image of forest, and especially these influencers that we know, these models that may have a lot of exposure to young people and then use them. And I think that's definitely something that is done. I see volunteer work, competition work. There's in some countries also award systems linked to some outdoor activities. I've read clan activities. I wonder if someone wanted to share what that was. I'm not familiar with it, unless it was, yeah, like there's a post on clan activities. If you want to share. And then we have more comments on social media are a wonderful attraction for kids. Yeah, and we need to use it. Then including nature-based, there's some suggestions on the kind of topics that could be included in the curricula, like, and the fact that they need to be simplified. I don't know if anyone wants to share a bit more, take the mic and share a bit more about what they wrote. If they want to give examples or own experiences that you want to share with others, please go ahead. Concerns you have related to this. Okay. William, I hear your mic is on. You may want to contribute. Okay. If nobody would like to share some experiences on this specific topic, maybe I would suggest we go to the last point that we wanted to explore together. Okay, so I see there's a comment from Waka Ahmed that says, as a social media ambassador for the Global Landscape Forum, I think is very attractive to the youth. So I don't know, Hamed, if you want to maybe give a bit of information on the work and what you were saying for social media, if you feel like. Okay. Maybe not. Right. So then let's go maybe to the last question that we wanted to discuss together, which is on how we can strengthen this kind of initiatives, basically reflecting on some of the obstacles. I saw that there was one comment in the chat on how the fact that forestry education is left in the hands of the private sector mostly may mean that it's difficult for these kind of education that we're advocating to happen. Or more, it's a challenge of running forestry education as a business. And so this is one of the challenges, and government are giving up on the desired funding for forestry practical training. So I think feel free to share either here or in a written form on how you think we could better support the wider uptake and wider availability of practical training opportunities. If you are not contributing, please mute.
Okay, sorry, my name is Anigitu from Nigeria Ministry of Environment, Cross River State. I think basically, if we want to really look at forestry, we need to motivate the youth by seeing the professionalism is within the forestry sector. Currently, the sector has not been treated like a very viable sector, and that's why the young people seem to be skeptical. Look at the forest pharmacology. If you look at the whole country, it's like having less than 3 professors in that kind of field. Yet the forestry sector has huge potential. How can we tap out this potential, bring out the business case, professionalize it, and people could dive into it, like they dive into engineering, medicine, and the rest. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, that's great. I think that's exactly the kind of issue. There's big opportunities, and how do we tap into that? And I think there were some answers, and the other answers may be in the kind of challenges there are in providing these opportunities. So please feel free to add your contributions to the last section on how we can better support and strengthen this kind of training, this type of forestry education and extension. What kind of recommendations you would make so that this is possible? I invite you now to add your post-its to the last box on the right-hand side, and so that we can then carry this to the plenary. I have here technology transfer.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yes, I'm Wilson again. I think one way of strengthening and institutionalizing training at TVET is basically to also look into the policy frameworks. How do the various countries, let me say, support TVET level training in terms of policies? For example, when you look at funding, when you look at the educational structure, when you look at the career development structure, now all these things come in to eventually kind of like make training at this level to be either not attractive and it look like it is something that is taken on because students or youth have nowhere else to go. So unless there is there are supportive policies to eventually make sure that, you know, whatever is being done is got backing at various levels, I think there is going to be a problem. The other issue is that there is also need to strengthen linkages between, for example, education, TVET level training and industry, so that there is a direct link, and probably there is a hope for the students that when they get out, they are going to, for example, be taken on by industry, but also industry needs to be convinced that the kind of training we are giving is the kind of training that they would want to see given to their potential employees, so that they finally take them on. So clearly it is like we need to have a situation where there is acceptability, where there is hope, and there is support for TVET training if it is to be supported and if it is to be seen thriving. And that is from the potential trainees and from also the potential employers and also from those who conduct the training.
Right. I'm not sure what happened there, but I guess if Wilson is here, we want to thank him very much for his last contribution. I think we are closing, but the link is going to be active. So in the next few minutes, if we go back in plenary, please do contribute with any recommendations you have. And I would like to take these few seconds that I may have left, I'm now a bit confused with time, to thank you all for your contributions and your patience with technology and the things you shared in writing as word or in the post-its, and also to thank our two speakers, Per and Stephen, for the great contributions. Okay, I do have 58 seconds, so I can go more slowly. And thank you so much. And thanks, Zoe, for helping me with the moderation, and Jose, who in the social forestry FAO team has been taking notes of all the points you have wanted to make. Maybe I'd like to just give Per and Steve the opportunity to say a couple of last words before we're jumping back into the room or dragged back into the room. And thank you, everyone.